Good. Good afternoon, everybody. You can hear sirens in the background. I'm in London, as I mentioned, so apologies for that. I'm sure they'll catch whoever they're after soon. Welcome. Good afternoon on this wet and dreary day. What better way to brighten up your lunchtime than to tune in with us as we discuss the future of HR. I'm Paul Church. I'm the Managing Director of Interquest. We're a tech, digital, data recruitment business, and welcome to our webinar series. I think this is number 14, and this is aimed at our HR, staffing and talent professional contacts. As I said, I'm in London today. I'm not sure. I'm sure I'm not the only one who has found it difficult to navigate exactly what to do in terms of working in a London office at the moment. The advice is work from home, of course, if you can. The can is very subject to interpretation. I was looking for an article and guidance over the last few days. I finally found one at the weekend, which broke everything down, and it was incredibly confusing, gave me a headache, and was beyond my comprehension. Maybe we'll talk a bit about that type of topic today. But for me at Interquest, if people wish to come to the office 2 days a week because of their own situation or because they feel they will perform better by being in here, then they're doing so. And as long as there are people here, then I will be here as well. Today is a slightly different setup as we have not just one, not two, but 3 speakers. And so I'm just letting some more people in. Yeah. And I'm really excited about the lineup as we discuss the future of HR. We will talk about how HR has changed in 2020, how the role of HR is even more important now than ever, and plenty more. The format will be myself asking questions to our speakers. And of course, I always encourage questions, but today I implore you to ask our employees to ask our panel questions because we really have an all-star team and just such a wealth of HR knowledge. So if you want to ask something, please do put it in the chat box and I'll certainly ask for you. Or if you want to jump in and ask yourself, that's fine as well. So let's get to the speakers. So first of all, we have Amina Folarin, the Global HR Director of Oliver Agency. Amina works at Oliver, as I said, a global in-house agency that plants teams of creatives within its clients' offices to encourage collaboration and improve project efficiencies. Amina believes firmly that HR is everyone's responsibility and that her job is making sure the senior and middle management teams have the support, training and tools they need to lead happy, productive teams. Amina leads the people function at Oliver, overseeing learning and development, recruitment and employee engagement and communication, acting as the business people's conscience in senior management team meetings to discuss the impact business decisions will have on employees. Amina also sits on Oliver's global exec committee and UK senior management team, regularly meeting with both teams to review and resolve any HR related issues, including recruiting for new business and discussing the talent needed agency wide. She's seen as the managing director of people within the business, bringing employees into the conversation and making sure their needs are continually addressed. Good afternoon, Amina. How are you doing?
Good. That's quite an introduction. Thanks, Paul. Hopefully I can live up to all of that. I'm good. I'm actually roasting in my office. I'm going to turn my heating down, but thanks for having me. Looking forward to contributing to today's panel.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Next, we have Rohan. So, welcome back. Ro was part of our supporting mental well-being in the workplace webinar a few weeks ago, which we got really strong feedback at. But as a reminder, Rohan is an HR director at Benevolent AI and an ambassador for Mind, the mental health charity. He has advised a number of high-profile companies on their mental well-being strategy, as well as involvement in national campaigns to raise awareness around mental health. Recently, he has worked with the FA, Heads Together, and Kensington Palace, speaking to Sky News, the BBC, and ITV about his own journey from severe mental illness and homelessness to advocacy and championing the significant role of sport and football in breaking down barriers in talking about mental well-being, especially for young men. He has in 2020 been named as a role model on the Inside Out leaderboard, celebrating workplace leaders who are open about their experiences of mental ill health. Away from work and mental health campaigning, he is happily married to Claire and has also run 37 marathons, mostly to raise awareness around mental health and homelessness. Welcome back, Ro. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. Just about getting back used to. The last time we did an event, I was back in the office, and I was back in the office then probably about 3-4 days a week. As HR, I'm probably role modeling what we're telling people, which is yes, you can come into the office, absolutely, but obviously, it needs to there needs to be a reason to go with it. So I'm having to role model that. So I'm now just getting back into the routine of working from home again over these last few weeks. But no, I'm very well, and pleasure to be with you as always.
Thank you, Ro. Yeah, it's a very stop-start out there at the moment. I think that's one of the hardest things, I think, at the moment. It's not working from home, it's not working in the office, it's a mixture of both, and it's different every week. So it's a constant challenge for all of us. Next, we've got Martin Nicholson, Director of Proaction HR. And I suppose Martin, a conversation I had with Martin was kind of the genesis for this webinar. But Martin has got 25 years in his HR and change management career, both in the UK and internationally. Martin has a strong desire to place people at the forefront of a business's success, which enables him to focus on the people agenda and realise opportunities for efficiency and better practice. A Prince 2 practitioner and qualified performance coach, Martin brings rigor and challenge to any client's business to enable them to achieve their goals. So welcome, Martin. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's been a few weeks since we first started talking about this subject, so I'm eager to get stuck in.
Fantastic. Well, look, great to have all three of you here. Thank you, everyone who's tuned in on this rainy day. As I said, please do pop your questions in the chat box. I will keep an eye on it. I'm just opening up now, so I've got visibility of it. But let's kick off. So, Martin, look, you started this, we started this. So let's kick off with yourself. So, how for you has the role of HR evolved in 2020?
Yeah, I think from my varied experience supporting a number of clients from sort of 35, 40 headcount engineering businesses right up to sort of certainly the medium size of SME, 600-700 staff businesses. And I think what it's done first and foremost, that the whole advent of COVID has created great, not that it shouldn't have needed it, but it took COVID to maybe put people on the agenda. And now certainly the conversations I'm having, I'm finding people in businesses wanting to talk about their people agenda, whereas before I'd have to introduce the agenda to them. And I'd have to get through the battle of convincing them that it actually was important to think about how they manage and influence staff and how they work best with their employee group. And suddenly actually you've got mid-managers and upwards thinking about it and coming to us. So what a refreshing change in that regard. Although there's a lot of people coming to us to talk about that, which is another hurdle, maybe another question along the way. But yeah, it's put HR on the map. Our capabilities to cope with it, our capabilities to deliver all that's needed, and our lack of experience in COVID, because everyone's on this call today has got, roughly speaking, about 8 months experience in it. I doubt many people have got more than that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. Amina, what would you say to that?
I would agree to Martin's point of view. I think this year has been quite a challenging year for most HR professionals. You know, we've had having to pivot and getting everyone working from home. Well, what does that look like for our policies? For some organisations, have had to deal with, you know, business leaders asking for their expertise on furlough when we've never had to deal with furlough before, and the guidance from the government was woolly at best and came out in dribs and drabs. On top of that, you had, you know, a much broader spotlight on the Black Lives Matter movement and the impact for what businesses should be doing for anti-racism and their diversity and inclusion policies. So I think this year HR has really been catapulted into the spotlight. I think in some instances, without the support and expertise it might have needed to deal with that. And then on top of that, I'm sure Rohan will be able to speak about it more eloquently than I, but really agonising now on how we support our employees through a pandemic, working from home and having to, you know, the mental impact of, you know, having kids at home, worrying about loved ones, potentially worrying about finances. I think it's definitely put them at the heart of the organisation, but perhaps not with the support always that they need.
Absolutely, thanks, Amina. And Ro, Amina kind of teed you up there. What do you think?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I don't really need to say too much. No, look, everything really that Amina and Martin have said. I think what I'd add to that, never has a successful people function been so in demand, but actually never has there been the expectation that you need to fix everything now. or you need to create everything now. And I think, you know, how has it changed is that people have seen the value that we bring, but people are potentially yet to realize that to add that value, we need the same kind of time and foundation and investment that other parts of the business need as well. And investment actually is coming because people can see the need of the value of, you know, engagement, well-being, etc., more so than ever in these times. Actually, my relationship with finance has never been stronger, which is probably a good thing. But, you know, has what we do changed? No, but the way we're having to do it is changing. And of course, the demands and expectations have changed. So look, it's a great year for HR, but no two ways about it. It's the most challenging one that we've faced.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, if we go into the kind of the working from home situation, so the return to people to work, whether they should work from home, whether they should come in, is really tricky for me as a leader. And I think anyone running a business, and certainly for people in senior HR positions. So how do we navigate that? Or how do HR professionals navigate this when we're trying to balance business needs, so keeping your business productive, so there is a business for everyone to come back to when this is all over, with the safety of people? Where do you start, and how do you do that, Ro?
With great difficulty. No, I think, look, we've had to be it's being pragmatic. I think the first thing we always did was to be legally compliant. Whatever the vagaries of government information was, to interpret it and always make sure that we were compliant with what we were being asked to do in that regard. But certainly, you know, in terms of when we started allowing people back into the office, you know, initially, of course, like many other companies, we said, okay, but if you lived with a key worker, or if you were traveling on public transport, there were probably restrictions, etc. But then you threw in the fact that actually it was good for people's well-being to be able to get into the office just 1-2 days a week as well. So our initial cohort was actually based on, are you finding it? We did a return to work survey, an engagement piece, and said, actually, are you finding it particularly difficult working from home? Whether that be, you know, to do with children, to do with not having the right space, setup, internet connection, whatever that may be. Those were the people who were given priority in terms of being able to come back into the office. We set our parameters in terms of the maximum number of people that could safely come in. What did security, cleaning, etc. look like for them to be confident to come in? And we just slowly built from that base. So we had, you know, just like the government have tiers now, we had our phases. So, you know, that was our phase one. Our phase two meant actually allowing certain squads and teams to come in and spend team days in the office as well. And we got to a maximum, although the building can at its capacity hold 250 people, we said our maximum was 250. Of course, now after the more recent announcements, we've actually stripped back to phase two and just said, look, of course the office is open and you have to book in advance to go in. You have to do your fill in your health and safety assessment, but you know, it is safe, it is operational. It is a COVID secure environment, and we encourage you to go in once, twice a week if you are able to, and if you feel safe doing so, and if it will benefit you. So look, it's been a journey, and it will continue to be over these winter months, because I think, you know, if we look at well-being, and I'm conscious, I want to make sure other people speak. As we look at the well-being part, I think people are going to feel that real lack of connectedness as we go into what I'm calling a third phase. First 3 months was, oh, this is a bit of a novelty, a bit of an adventure, but it's not going to be forever, so we'll just do it, the working from home. Next 3 months, oh, it's getting better, we're coming out of it, and we're getting a little bit of freedom back. Now we're being told, actually, restrictions come back in, it's indefinite. The days are getting longer, the days are getting shorter, the nights are getting longer, and suddenly people are getting very anxious, and we need to manage that, and that includes giving them the space to come in and work in the office if we possibly can. Sorry, Martin and Amina, I think I've gone on a little bit too long there, but.
No worries at all. Look, so Martin, we were talking about this the other day. From any business that's got any kind of sales function like mine, and most have, in some ways, you need much higher productivity than you did 12 months ago, and you actually have to do a lot more to get probably the same or less. So you're trying to balance that with empathy towards your people, of all the hardships we're all facing internally and externally. So what have your experiences been in the last 6 months or so?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, the large organisation I support presently is as a workforce of 750, and probably 300 of those are sales focused. And the bigger issue in that space is absolutely that, Paul, that you can't measure performance in the summer of 2020 versus the summer of 2019. They're just completely different, opposite figures. So actually, you've got to start to measure on efforts and activities. And we had this conversation about the traditional recruitment consultant, and the main high street type recruitment consultant typically would be at the early outset of a graduate joining the organization, right? You've got to make so many hundred of calls to new clients and existing clients, and very, very granular detail to drive efforts. And actually, you've kind of got to go back to the efforts and the activities rather than the outcome, because it's almost impossible to do a comparison of what results look like. But I also, just pulling on Ro's mention of the kind of phases, he's absolutely right. The government's using kind of the start of the second wave. Well, when that actually started and when it actually occurs, I'm not too sure, but we definitely have 3 phases. That first 3 months was adrenaline fueled, we will get by, but at a lot of effort and a lot of impact on the individual. And then we went into the summer of, okay, it's starting to come back, it feels good, and actually we're getting some responses. I was around my main client the day that Boris announced, and I'm not knocking the announcement, but announced that actually start to go back to work from home, or whatever those words were. And it's kind of, wow, the floor just dropped morale-wise, because suddenly actually the end is not in sight. The end is somewhere into 2021, we hope. And how do you maintain that motivation? So, but yeah, on the sales side, it's measurement of efforts, it's measurement of activity. Actually, that organization has proven that productivity-wise, they can sustain the organization. What worries me more is culturally, can they maintain it? Because sitting at home every day is hard.
100%. And Amina, how have yourself and Oliver navigated this really tricky situation?
Quite similar experiences to both Rohan and Martin. We actually we closed the office when we had to, and as soon as we took the decision to reopen in June or July, I can't remember now, and that was actually for the benefit of our employees, because not everyone can work from home well. Not everyone lives in a 3-bed house with a spare room they can put a desk in. Some of our average age of employees are early 30s. Some of them are in house shares where they're internationals that couldn't get home. So we opened the office for those that felt like they were able to travel in. We put in the right social distancing measures for those people. But to Martin's point, we did see a bounce in the summer. People started fit, motivation went up. Our engagement scores actually working from home and during the pandemic are the highest they've ever been. So we know that our employees are engaged, but now it's the burnout, it's how they're feeling mentally. We've seen an increase in people feeling anxious. More videos are switched off when you have the team meetings. The energy's not there, and I worry about kind of our more junior employees that learn on the job. They learn by sitting next to someone and watching what they do, watching how a conversation takes place. Some of those moments are being lost now, because you can't, unless you invite someone to that Zoom meeting, you kind of don't know really what's going on. So we've seen that our younger workforce, it's impacting everyone in different ways. I've definitely seen that has been a problem. So as soon as we can safely encourage people back to the office, we will do that. We haven't closed, it's still there for people that want to access it. But after the last announcement, we did notice we went from, the numbers were creeping to like 80, 100 people. And, you know, I think you'd be lucky if you kind of get 10 to 15 people a day in the office now, which is going to be the next challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an up and down thing. I think, you know, one week you think, okay, everything's going to be all right. Next week you hear a bit of news and you think, no, it's not. And so the morale and the well-being is it's a constant roller coaster. So Amina, just sticking with yourself, what do you do or Oliver do, or do you think we could do to really look after the well-being of our workforce in 2020?
Well, I think, you know, some of the things that we did that worked quite well during the kind of phase one were online exercise classes. So we actually used our networks of like people that were Barry's boot camp instructors. So we used a community of people that we knew were also going to be struggling. You know, the gyms were closed, they didn't have any financial backing for a while. So we brought our wider community of people in to run various classes, comedy shows, etc. But that all worked first time round, but let's face it, we're all sick of Zoom. So the challenge now is, how do we take some of those learnings and encourage people to be active going into what is already a difficult, you know, period, winter, people suffer from SAD. So we're focusing our wellbeing strategy around moving, mind, and munch, which is the food, and money. So we've got a few different initiatives across those 4 core pillars for us, making sure that, you know, our employees know how to manage their finances, particularly at a time where, you know, you're more likely to go crazy during the Black Friday sales, what have you. Encouraging group activities. So we're looking at the moment if we can buy everyone a Fitbit, where we can actually have like a company steps challenge, just helping our employees be really conscious of their well-being and raising it to their consciousness that they have to be responsible for themselves with our support, and how getting rid of meetings on a Friday. You know, I think we have so many more meetings now than we ever did. So how can we scale some of that back and have 2 days a month where we don't have any meetings, or internal meetings anyway? We're a client-led business. So, you know, how can we have fewer of those so people have more time to do their appraisals, to complete that training that they're really wanting to do, or just to go to the gym, walk the dog, whatever it might be. So just looking at ways we can be flexible with supporting people's well-being.
Absolutely. And yeah, you don't want to end up having meetings about meetings, do you? And I think, yeah, absolutely. Everyone's sick of Zoom. Everyone's sick of virtual online quizzes. My CEO said to me earlier on, he heard that webinars are becoming the new online quizzes. So I'm wanting to think about how I'm doing this format, but we'll see. But Ro, look, we talked a lot about well-being in the previous webinar, but look, absolutely worth revisiting. So what about yourself?
So look, you know, very, very much as Amina said, it's looking at, you know, what are the key pillars which are going to allow people to actually be to thrive. And actually, I think it's been really important to reframe the language. So when we've talked, you know, we specifically used the word well-being and not referred to mental health. You know, start talking about mental well-being, as we've spoken about before, mate, is, you know, the minute we start talking about mental health in the workplace, we immediately end up going down the conversation of mental illness, clinical illness, and actually that's obviously something that we're trying to prevent here. But how do we prevent it? We prevent it by actually giving people the tools to actually maximize their well-being, both physically and mentally. So it's you know, it's encouraging. Something that Amina said, and I've said before, is it needs to be owned by the people. So all of our colleagues own their well-being. They own sharing ideas with each other. We've got a well-being resource bank on our intranet, which people can add to, and it's got all kinds of books, music, playlists, apps, running routes, you name it, things that people are using to actually maximize their well-being. And of course, that most of those things happen outside the workplace. More of a challenge is, how do we maintain inside the workplace? The meeting piece is without a shadow of a doubt, the biggest challenge I think that most of us face right now. I know for myself today, I'll have been on video calls and meetings from 8 a.m. through till 4 p.m. before I can actually start doing some work. You know, the reality is the knock-on effect that has on me as an individual, but on my team, because I don't get the chance to actually spend that time guiding them through their work. And we know there are reasons for that. You know, the water cooler conversation, certainly as an HR professional, so often the most beneficial conversation is that, you know, catch up with someone. It's kind of like, come, let's just go and grab 2 minutes. Let's go and grab a coffee. Let's go and have that walk. At the moment, you have to put half an hour into someone's diary. Even if the chat takes 2 minutes, you've got the next half an hour block coming up, and it's very difficult to get into any type of routine and productivity. And this is actually then where the challenge comes to leadership. We do have to accept whatever we like to think, and we're all in an environment where we have challenging targets that we have to hit, but we have to be realistic about the fact that productivity is not going to be what it might be in these circumstances. And we need to make really clear and transparent decisions about what that looks like now, so we can set fair expectations on our people. Otherwise, that's what's going to drive the anxiety, and that's where we're going to hit the real buffers.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ro. We've got a question in the group chat from Martin Warner. So Martin Nicholson, I'll go straight to you to answer this if you don't mind. So I'll read it out.
Sure.
Hi, Martin. A question for the panel today. With companies putting in so much effort to keep employees engaged during COVID and people working from home, is there a danger that companies drop this effort when we return to the office environment after COVID? And what should HR professionals be doing to avoid this? What do you think, Martin?
I did get the advantage of reading a couple of minutes ago, but it's a really great question. I'll answer it two ways, Paul, and thanks, Martin, for the question. Firstly, what I'm trying to do with organisations, and going back to Rohan's point about meetings, is create a conversation about the culture. That if we go back to those three phases, the first phase was adrenaline fueled. The summer phase was actually everything's going to be back to normal soon. And this third phase is a dawning of we don't know when and what. It's almost that there's no light in the distance in the tunnel that we can see. So creating conversations within organizations that says, so if this is around for, let's pull a date out, right? We know no better. If this is around for another year, how are we going to manage differently moving forward? Because how we managed the crisis was probably, certainly if I think of my style, it was quite almost bordering on dictatorial, right? Right, we need to do this, 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 and this. And actually people were responding because they wanted leadership and they needed action right there, right now. And as we went through the summer, there's an opportunity to start to reflect and go, what happens if this is around for longer, and what do we do with it? So quite a long answer, but what I'm now doing with my main client at the moment is creating a working group looking at how do we manage remote working? What haven't we done because we thought it was only going to be 2, 3, 4 months that we now need to think about? And what have we learned lessons wise from doing it this year that we can actually apply into the winter and beyond, that we can improve still further on? So almost a revamp and a reinvigoration of it. Now, I will get to Martin's question, which is, if you've got that process in play, the return to the office is exactly the same. Okay, so now we are a year, 18 months, whatever the time frame is, I'll be positive. Now we are a year after COVID first launched. We're sat here in sort of March of next year, and the cure's been found and we're back in the office 100%. Great, fantastic. So as we're heading back, what do we need to think about? What are the learnt behaviours that we need to break down? And either accept that the world is different a year on, and we've learnt some behaviours that are going to exist forever, working from home policies, flexible working, etc., or go, how do we actually help manage people relearn to be in an office 5 days a week? So I think that's where HR should be thinking to the future and going, how do we deal with the inevitable, which is at some point we will get rid, we'll go through COVID. Just a real big shout out to Rose's earlier point. if you haven't read it already, go and buy several sets of Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni and send it around your leadership team. Don't tell them what it's about, ask them to read it, and then reflect in a month's time.
I'll certainly do that. Thanks, Martin Nicholson, for the answer. Amina, is there anything else to add to Martin Warner's question? Anything you think?
I think that companies that have their employees at the heart of their strategies will maintain, the pace and the types of things that have worked for their employees with flexibility. Do I think that when we can go back to working in an office we'll be 100% remote? No, because I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't work for our particular model. But should we be looking at our policies to say, well, if 100% remote doesn't work, what's the in between, and how do we maintain the engagement and the culture that we created for our employees whilst we're all working remotely? And just being flexible and trying to see as far into the future as we can, and making sure that our HR strategies are fit for purpose. But I don't think there's any reason why HR professionals should stop at the, once COVID comes to an end, because in reality, when is it coming to an end? We don't know. So we just have to carry on.
Fantastic. Thanks, Amina. And Ro, anything final to add on Martin Warner's question?
No, I think actually it's almost, I definitely don't think we'll drop the effort, but I think it will all be around actually what's the balance. What is the balance in when things do get to the point where people can go back into the office, actually how will we keep people engaged, knowing that actually I am doing 4 or 5 commutes a week? Actually, where do we find the middle ground which keeps people productive, connected, and mentally well? So at the moment, I think people are productive. Obviously, we know that mental well-being is challenging for many at the moment, but in the main, they're mentally well. I don't think anyone can say that they're connected in the same way that they have been in the past, but we're all as companies doing our best to keep people connected. But actually the next challenge will be, how do we bring that balance at a time when being in the building is more prominent?
Absolutely. And Ro, I think we talked about this the other day. We've talked about kind of the empathy and the supporting of the people in the business. Is there a danger in HR becoming the sympathy brigade?
There's always that danger, but I think there probably always has been that danger. I think, one of the things that we have definitely had to do is, yes, we have to listen, we have to take feedback on, and then we have to inform leaders of those engagement trends, of those well-being trends, of the feedback that we're getting. But essentially, so yeah, there's no two ways about it. There is a danger. In terms of how have I personally seen us overcome that danger, it is by ensuring that we are listening and not just paying lip service. And when we do say no to something, actually explaining what the rationale is and actually giving alternative solutions. So actually don't be a sympathy brigade, be solution focused, but it doesn't mean that you're actually bending over and just, one of the conversations I had with one of my direct reports this morning was very similar. It's not about what they want, it's about what we can provide, which actually allows them to be successful and thrive. And that's really, the outcome for us is, as a business, what allows us to continue growing and continue being very successful. For our people, what answers their concerns, but actually doesn't compromise the first piece.
Thanks, Ro. Amina, in your opinion, do you think there's become more of an appetite for the voice of HR now in the boardroom?
Well, I think given what we talked about in the first question, where HR has kind of been catapulted into a lot of different conversations, I definitely think that they have. I think, I haven't personally worked at an organisation where HR hasn't had that voice, but I know that isn't the experience of for some HR professionals, and I know that is a struggle for some. So I think, yes, that HR is often invited to the boardroom, but whether it's always heard is a different matter, and that's where things like data come into. You have to have data to be able to prove the business case of why you should do something, why the leaders need to listen and engage. Because I think sometimes, having a gut feel or knowing it's intrinsically right is not always going to help get it over the line.
Absolutely. And Martin, I know we spoke about this, but what's your experience been?
I think just the very fact that people are thinking about their people puts HR right up there in the spotlight. I think there are a lot of organisations that, okay, they've got some tough decisions to make commercially in terms of their revenues and their costs. But the majority of people, certainly around that adrenaline-fueled period, were first and foremost focused on their staffing and the welfare of individuals. So I think it's brought, dare I say it, a more humanistic side to business, certainly in 2020, and that has given maybe a little bit more voice to HR. And I think also it depends how we as HR respond and react to that in terms of, I certainly haven't wanted to go and rush to the wrong answer, but actually there's a bit of reflection, working out the right routes, the right strategy to get a result for an organisation. And if you rush to it, no, they're not going to take you seriously at the boardroom. You're going to be a reactive force that actually listens to the leadership team, and it might not always be the right answer. Actually, if you come to the leadership team with, right, this is causing us a problem now, and have you looked to the future of COVID and what this might force us into doing, that's a different level of conversation. So I think it gives us the opportunity. It's how we grasp it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Martin. If anybody else has got any other questions, please do pop them in the chat box. I'm conscious of time, and I've got a few more to run through, of course, though. But Ro, this is about I suppose this is called the future of HR. Obviously, we're talking a lot about 2020. What do you think this year has meant in terms of how the role will change over the coming years, and what new skills do you think the new wave of HR talent need to have to succeed in their careers?
Ooh, now there's a question. I think we've had to really be chameleons, and I think that the whole being able to multitask from, I lead a team of 5 people, senior business partners, and we've that's across multiple disciplines and multiple countries. So I do think the multitasking piece, the being able to, I think, commercial awareness, none of these things are rocket science to us as HR people, but I think people are just beginning to realize quite how important they are. Commercial awareness, because actually we really do need to drive data and drive investment in our people. And we need to have the commercial awareness to actually understand what data we need and to actually put forward the best proposals in terms of both, cost and effect. So I think commercial awareness is absolutely huge. I do think actually, one of the big things for us has been the legal knowledge and being able to work closely with a legal counsel. So very good collaboration, not just with your stakeholders, but with the wider business support functions, because there's going to be so much now around global mobility in terms of people saying, well, I've been able to work successfully from here, why can't I? Well, actually, you create quite a risk to yourself and the business by working where you are right now, so you can't, kind of piece. So look, having the ability to collaborate, the ability to really, really have strong commercial awareness, I would say are 2 of the biggest things that I'd be looking for when I hire next into my team.
Absolutely, thanks, Ro. Amina, what advice would you give HR now when it comes to flexible working policies? Because it's a bit of a minefield. It's come up quite a lot with some of my HR contacts. But what advice would you give?
With it's a bit of a minefield, really. So I think that's such a broad question. Speak to legal. No, I think you have to build flexible working policies that work for your business and work for your people and are as inclusive as possible. To Rohan's point, we'll get lots of people now, they're like, I want to spend 6 months in Australia and I work UK hours, without really understanding the tax liability. We've probably got people that have disappeared halfway around the world and we don't even know it yet, if I'm honest. So I think your flexible working policies have to be fit for purpose, but also, just putting the needs and the demands of the employees at the heart of it, and also their health and safety. If they're going to become 100% remote workers, can the business help support that? Do they know all of the risks that they're taking on by allowing people to work remotely 100% of the time? So I think it's really understanding your employees, if I'm honest, and your business model.
Absolutely. Martin, what do you think about the policy side of the remote working and flexible working?
So my favourite phrase at the moment is, if I was to write a flexible working policy for you right now, it would be out of date in a week. And I mean that with effect. We are operating in a period where change is so significant. Yes, it's important to have, but I wouldn't promise the earth. I've got loads of questions from staff and clients going, so now I'm working from home on a regular basis. Can I have this once COVID goes away? I don't know that answer. Let's face into that when we know COVID is going away. Yeah, we'll think about it, but let's wait until when we know that happens, because I think there's a big difference between March next year or March 2022, learned behaviours, new styles of working. You see some of the bigger digital companies doing it and already kind of declaring that the future of working from home. I don't think it suits every organisation, and certainly 5 days a week will not suit most organisations. So with care, but at the moment, I'm slightly non-committal, if I'm honest, of there is probably a time and a place for the work from anywhere policy. And I think, and in those sort of organizations, working from the beach in Greece might be as productive as working from an office, but it won't serve every organization. So it's start to plan for it in terms of your organization, but right now don't commit to a new flex working policy forever. Commit to something for COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking too far ahead is absolutely it's almost a dangerous thing. I mean, can you imagine trying to guess what the world's going to look like in 2022? I don't even know what the world's going to look like at Christmas. So we've got a new question in the chat box from Chris Harazinski. Hi, Chris. I'll throw it out to you, Ro. So thanks for the emojis here as well, Chris.
Thanks.
It added to the effect. I've seen new HR jobs on the market. Is it a sign of the times, or just funky names of roles that have existed already? So Chief Learning Officer, Head of Remote, Chief Diversity Officer, Chief Wellbeing Officer, Director of People Happiness. What do you think?
I think it's a mixture of both. These roles have had a place in an organisation, although they've probably not had the kind of seniority and probably money being thrown at them as some of them have been. But no, I mean, look, I think in reality, we've had people focusing on, depending on the size of your business and the size of your people team. There have certainly been roles which have emphasized well-being, roles that have emphasized diversity. Am I surprised that they've suddenly become C-level roles? I think it depends on the size of the organization. We certainly couldn't do it. As soon as when Black Lives Matter, and when we did have the initial I'm not going to use the word crisis, because I think it was long overdue in the spotlight, but that's for another conversation altogether. Suddenly on top of my team looking after people partnering and the people experience across the business, by the way, they're also going to be looking after diversity, and it's kind of like, well, I thought we already were. So look, all of these roles have existed. It's just the fact that people are, dare I say, where they're being publicized in this way, it's often a ruse, whether it's a Glassdoor, a LinkedIn, or anything else, of companies being able to show the world, yeah, we're doing something about this.
Thanks, Ro. So we've got another question that's come through. It's on the private chat, so I'm going to throw this to you, Amina, but I'll have to read it out to you and you won't be able to read it. But I think this ties into, we were talking earlier about the sympathy brigade. We've talked a lot about HR being that empathetic, supportive voice. So the question is, most people expect HR to be headstrong, the people who fix problems. How do businesses ensure that their HR team has someone to talk to them when they are struggling with work, home life, or any other issues? Are there any people who have a great structure for their HR teams and support them too? Great question. What do you think, Amina?
Well, I think HR has two roles. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with HR leaders being empathetic. I think actually quite often in businesses, you know, the other people that are around you aren't necessarily always the most empathetic. And I think it's okay for HR to deliver commercially, but also to care about its people. You know, empathy is not the same as sympathy. Empathy is seeing the problem and helping people find a way out of it, and putting in the tools, the processes, and the frameworks to navigate all of that. So I think from my experience, I remind my HR business partners, well, actually their job titles are people partners, because I want them to remember that they're there for the people. And all of our processes, whether we're doing redundancies or performance management, how would you feel if you were in that person's shoes? It's okay to, you know, do a nice redundancy process, because one day that could be you. You want that person to leave having had such a good experience, even in a often negative circumstance, as they did when they joined the company. So I think, you know, going back to when HR started, you know, years ago on the factory floor, it was there as the voice of the people. So I don't think we should forget that in our strive to be at that top table delivering commercially. We have to remember that we are there to represent our employees. And I think, you know, business partners, HR advisors, again, it depends on your structure, the size of the organizations. I think you have to remember, you know, really, we're there to deliver results through our people.
Absolutely, completely agree. Thanks, Amina. Martin, so there's been a massive emphasis this year on new skills which are needed to survive in this world, if we can, and this culture and this way of working. So how does HR manage this huge new focus on learning on L&D, basically, on learning and development of new skills?
Yeah, I was actually just noticing those job titles earlier. So, what was it? Chief Learning Officer. I think there is, certainly from my experiences with clients, there wasn't a gap before in our management capability within the UK, but certainly remote working brings the spotlight back to, dare I say it, and this is not about age, but Generation X style managers and the must see to know that people are performing. As I said, it's kind of, you should be focusing on effort, not visibility. If you have a Teams call, just because they don't turn up doesn't mean they're not working productively. So I think certainly my focus is a lot at the moment in terms of collaboration, team building, not the soft go to the pub, but actually how do you create from a distance teams gelling and continuing to gel within organizations. And a lot of that is playing back to the people manager, the leader within the organization, and how they do it. Can I just comment, just in things, a classic one, kind of link it up, that what Amina said there about this balance between drive and empathy is the classic piece. Actually, if we can create that empathy and it's genuine and encourage that within an organization, balanced with drive, of course, if we can create that in an organization, then half the battle of remote working and connecting with your staff is already at least part conquered. But not every manager has that skill and that ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ro, in a world right now where we are working so much more isolated and away from each other, one of the things I've heard from a lot of our clients and that they're struggling is that in terms of maintaining good communication throughout the business, obviously we don't want meeting after meeting, but how do we feel like everyone is still part of that same unit and that business and that team? How have you done that at Benevolent AI?
Look, it genuinely not easy, and we've done different things at different times. So you know, having happy hours at the end of every week worked at the start, but then actually you know, more and more then you know, we found that people were Zoom fatigue. Well, we don't use Zoom, we use Google, but let's call it Zoom as a brand, as not as a brand, just as an action. But you know, people were Zoom fatigued, and actually the thought even of a drink on a Friday evening with colleagues remotely just didn't appeal to them more video time. I know, even, you know, for me it was very much after I'd been on video all day, all I wanted to do was just chill and hang out with my wife and kind of like put the week to bed. Having said that, we have reintroduced the happy hour recently with just a few changes. I think in terms of how we communicate work-based information, you know, the newsletters and the weekly all hands have been hugely important to make people feel that they're communicated to in terms of everything that's happening on the work side. And then really empowering teams to take ownership of their own social arrangements, making sure they have their own, you know, team meetings, which aren't work related, all of them, you know, making sure that people are doing that. One of the things we did implement was Donut. So Donut, basically random, and the cost is negligible. It basically plugs into our Slack messaging system, and basically allocates you anyone in the company randomly to check in, to have a 30-minute catch up with every week. Now I know, again, it's more 30 minutes of video. However, the rule we put in with all of our donuts is it's not work related, it's just social. So I had a lovely donut with our COO this morning, where we talked the pros and cons of VAR. You know, we've done different things which just for a minute try and get people back into that you would do, whether it be in the kitchen over lunch or just walking around the building. It's kind of like, how you doing? Just reminding people, ask people how they are, and not just how work is. And just letting people take ownership of that.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ro. A couple of questions have come through just so you've been talking. So, Ro, a question that came through: what are the changes, lessons learned, needs the employee you did to today's happy hour?
So what we've done, definitely trying not to do so many of the company-wide one, because actually it's almost too many people to really connect with and engage. So trying to get departments and smaller teams to take ownership. Also, you know, telling people, well, actually, it doesn't have to be on Friday evening. If Friday evening are when you go off and do something with the kids or the wife, why don't you do it on a Thursday or something like that? So we've definitely, Pierre, we've not rewritten the rule book, just kind of like made some subtle changes to fall into the routines of our people.
Thanks, Ro. And just in terms of just something we've done at Interquest, everyone's interested, because it's tough to come up with virtual online things to do, and you can do your happy hours, which are great. One thing we did the other day was an online escape rooms, which is really, really good. Teams of 6 to 8, a very good team bonding thing. Get you all banging head against the wall virtually, of course. A couple of questions then, just before we kind of wrap this up. So one's come through to me on the private. So Amina, I'll throw this one to you. First of all, amazing panel, which absolutely is. I fear as a bisexual employee, LGBTQ plus experience is off the agenda for HR these days, as is being disabled and working from home, and replaced with Black Lives Matter and mental health, both of which are of course important. I fear HR have a lot to focus on. Does the future of HR still prioritise disabled at home staff and LGBTQ staff?
I wouldn't say that from our organisation, I'm not going to speak for everyone, that, you know, LGBTQ rights have been replaced by Black Lives Matter. I think Black Lives Matter and anti-racism is something that should have always been on everyone's agenda, and it was just raised to the consciousness. So it might feel like there's a lot of activity around that at the moment, because quite frankly, there hasn't been near enough for, you know, centuries in the workplace. But if organisations have, that being said, if you have a good inclusion and diversity strategy, then it's about inclusivity for all, not inclusivity for one group over another. So, and also, you know, to Rohan's point about, you know, HR being responsible for I&D, I actually think it shouldn't be. I think that actually I&D should have its own department. It might work with the HR professionals, but actually it should have its own department to make sure that it can influence and it can have the safe space to challenge some of HR's policies and processes are rooted in discrimination, and it's just because they've just been regurgitated for years without really anyone thinking and challenging it. It's what you taught on your CIPD and it's what you learned from the HR director before you. So I&D needs to have a safe space to be able to call out some of the HR leaders, like, actually, this isn't quite right. The way we do our appraisal process isn't really that inclusive. And I think actually if organisations are smart about it, disability in the workplace and people working remotely, in theory, whether organisations have realised that or not yet, it should provide access for more employees with disabilities, particularly those with physical disabilities, because they don't have to travel into offices. Neurodiversity isn't a disability, but it's also an area of diversity that actually isn't talked about enough. And again, working remotely can provide safe spaces for neurodivergent employees to actually thrive, because they're not always on the spot in social circumstances that might impact their ability to perform. So my view is that it shouldn't overtake, that perhaps it might feel like there's been a real spotlight on anti-racism, Black employees, but that actually a good I&D strategy is inclusive of all difference.
Fantastic answer. Thanks, Amina. And Martin, anything to add on that one before I just go to the wrap up?
Yeah, I had a fortunate opportunity with one of my clients to actually, partly because of the gender pay gap report being quite so appalling in February when we were looking at it, to introduce or reintroduce networks, employee resource groups within the organisation. And actually just taking Amina's example and just spinning it a little bit further, the HR policies are now a target and openly encouraged to be a target for those networks. So we've got a parent network that are actually looking at our parental time out type policies, everything to do with maternity, paternity, etc., and looking at new ways of doing it. I know that doesn't answer the original question, but for me, actually the whole piece, anything around diversity inclusion, only opens the space for all elements of inclusion. So we are not talking about, correct myself, of course we are talking about our Black colleagues, but we are also talking about other colleagues in the organisation, and we're giving other weight to other groups at the same time. So if anything, there's just more focus.
Fantastic. Thanks, Martin. Well, look, I'm conscious of time, so I always like to kind of end with just kind of a one takeaway from everyone. So, Ro, if we just start with you, most of our audience are HR professionals, the people who will watch this on the video after we in HR. What is the one thing you've learned, or one kind of piece of advice you would give those in HR whilst they're trying to weather this 2020 storm?
I think the biggest thing is something that we alluded to in one of the questions, is actually be kind to yourself. You can't change everything. You can't fix everything. You can't be everything for everyone at the moment. So decide what you're going to focus on and deliver it. Don't try and win every battle. So, listen to your people, understand what the priorities are, and choose them wisely. Don't try and achieve everything, because actually, especially in this, in this environment, it's going to be very, very difficult, and it will have a toll.
Thanks, Ro. And Amina, what's been your kind of big takeaway from this year? One thing you'd advise our audience and those in HR after this year?
After this year, I mean, I was going to say be kind to yourself. I've seen kind of a lot of my team, who are usually quite resilient, drop like flies at various points during the last 6 months. So I think it's really important to remember, I said to one of my direct reports today, I was like, we are operating within a really stressful time. It's a pandemic anyway, and as well as the business being busy. So you can take a time out and just regather your thoughts, just be kinder to yourself. So I think that definitely is the first and foremost, that, remembering to support the HR community. I think someone asked the question earlier, who looks after HR? But I think it's important to just say, when enough is enough, and take that time out. And I think, you know, our big takeaway really has been around inclusion and diversity and working from home, and the opportunities that can bring for our organisation and for our business. So I don't think that should be forgotten, because actually, you know, Zoom, Google Hangouts, whatever you want to use, can also, you know, reinforce some of the issues that might already be existing in your organisation.
Thanks, Amina. And finally, Martin, last but not least, what's your one takeaway for this year and advice moving forward?
Sure, I think it probably ties to the two comments Ro and Amina have just made, really. For me, it's if we go back to the original subject of, is HR being taken more seriously at the board and what's the future of HR? If we continue to focus, to Ro's point about fixing everything and therefore not succeeding because there's just too much to go and fix at the moment, we will never be taken seriously as a force. And if there's one function within the organisation at the moment can best help the organisation and its staff, it's the HR function. So to go back to the phrase, give yourself a break, but more importantly, give yourself some thinking time. How many of those Teams, Zoom type meetings can you have in a day? And how many times do you need to sit in a quiet corner and just think about the future and what else you should now be looking at? Give yourself that time, because you can't do it during a Zoom call. And how many of us, like Ro, have got meetings from 8 till 4 in the afternoon, right?
Absolutely. Well, look, thanks, Martin. Well, look, it's 2:05, so I think we'll wrap it up there. And look, thank you, Ro. Thank you, Amina. Thank you so much, Martin. Thanks to everyone who tuned in today. Next week, we will be talking about mindfulness in a digital age. I think we may even have our presenter doing a very short live meditation as well. Maybe we all need that after 2020. So see you all next week. The video for this will be up within a week or so. But yeah, thanks again to our fantastic speakers. And hopefully I'll see everyone else next week.
Thanks for hosting.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.